G'day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Battle video. In this video we are going to be taking a look at the new Infinite Dragon Ball history stage for foes who faced Majin Buu. I think it's labeled and basically we are taking on anyone who has fought Majin Buu. So this is quite a few units and it's a pretty interesting stage. I would say based on difficulty it's relatively difficult. It's all all of these are always going to depend on like your own team builds, variations and such, and so it's always going to be very dependent on your box more so than anything else, and you're not just going to be able to easily take on all of these stages if you don't have the requisite units. But we start off against Gohan and he hits relatively hard. It starts quite difficult out the gate. Gohan is immune to stunning, and then we move into Vegeta, who is immune to stunning and is also immune to sealing. So of course they start right out the gate, immune to stunning, immune to sealing, and just basically giving you a whole bunch of issues. After that we'll be taking on Goku, who is immune to stunning and sealing and also attack lowering, and continuously they will improve of such nature. Now there are two challenges for this stage. There is a challenge for utilizing the characters who are from the Power of Wishes category, and you need to use 3 of them. And there are challenges for using characters that are from the Majin Power category, and you also need to use 3 of those. So it's pretty challenging to fit all of these. Majin Buu Saga felt like the best way to go, at least for me. It felt like the one that suited me the most, so I was quite happy with that. But of course, it's just going to depend on where you're at as a person. Whether you are like where your box is, what kind of build you got. If you have the latest summonable units, you're probably going to have a bit of a better time than myself, who doesn't have the summonable units or the latest LRs. So it's all going to depend on what units you have. So don't feel too like limited by this team build that I'm using. You can use whichever one you want, but yeah, for me this one felt like it was the best, at least from my perspective. Of course, to each their own. I think most players, at least from my perspective, will have their own feelings about what team they want to run for these, but I try to make teams that I feel like are accessible, although in this case I wasn't able to complete the missions with a lot of free-to-play players or units. There wasn't a lot of Majin Power options, unfortunately, and there wasn't a lot of strong options overall. And I think this was somewhat limiting, unfortunately, at least for me as a player. So beyond that though, I think at the end of the day it was still a pretty decent attempt, I want to say. A relatively strong attempt with some good characters that ended up being, I feel quite accessible. At the same time it could not be. I think some of you, could find it to be a team that's maybe not accessible, maybe is accessible. Difficult to say. For me it felt right, but I don't really want to dictate to anyone how they should build their team. So let's talk about the team. And the team itself I felt did pretty well. Honestly speaking, I think the team was quite strong. I think it was a good team. I think it was one that fulfilled all the requirements that it needed to, whilst also having some pretty good set rotations. So for example, we have good old AGL Super Buu. He's going to be sitting on the 1 side of things. And Super Buu, he's pretty strong. He has his guard capabilities, which is always pretty good. Always nice to have a unit that can guard. I think most players appreciate that, especially when you're looking at like strength of a character. So having one that can guard, pretty strong, quite nice, quite, like, I would say, a suitable arrangement, especially for first slot. He also has guaranteed guard if he's facing a Majin Buu Saga category enemy. So, on that retrospect, a really strong unit. I think for the most part, a lot of people probably find that he's a good option in terms of like performance. Then again, of course, there is always that burning question of who to run with him, and in this case we have a pretty good option. We're going to be running the Strength Buu, so we're going to be running either the Strength Buuhan if he transforms that way. If we're too low in health though, he'll turn into Bukalo, or he'll turn into Buu Tanks. Either one is fine. So we're going to be running him, and then we're obviously going to be running the Strength Buu as well. Pretty solid unit. So I would say from that perspective, pretty decent stuff. I would say the team ran smoothly on that rotation. We didn't end up having too many problems, at least from my perspective. So of course, on the other rotation, we have the Tech Ultimate Gohan. Obviously a fantastic defensive unit with the ability to guard, which is super duper helpful, and I think most players would appreciate it. For the most part, a strong unit with very strong performance in terms of defense, and just a very, very good performer in general that I think we could be quite reliant on. So I was very happy with that. Very happy just in general with everything. I think for the most part there wasn't really a poor performer on the team. Alongside Tech Gohan, or Tech Ultimate Gohan, we have the Strength Ultimate Gohan. Again, a very, very reliable unit. Obviously his guard only has a chance to proc, but he was still a very, very solid unit that performed decently throughout the course of the battle, providing some support to the Tech Gohan, whilst also simultaneously being pretty strong defensively and helping us out in most situations. He also shares a lot of good links when you transform the Tech Ultimate Gohan, so that makes them a pretty strong rotation. On the other side of things, we have the Tech transforming Evil Buu. So this is the unit that starts out at Majin Buu. Now this unit has obviously aged over time. Their damage reduction in their Majin Buu state is not the craziest. I think we're looking at like 20% or something, and then it goes up to a 30% I think, and then when you transform them it becomes 50%. That's where things start to get a little bit better, I want to say, like a little bit more impactful, a little bit kind of stronger in terms of performance. And yeah, I would say that's where things start to maybe look better or perform better. And yeah, I think for me, that's where he starts to really shine. I think as a unit, he actually is very, very impressive to me. And honestly, I was quite happy with his overall performance as a unit, especially when I factored in just how good he's doing once he builds up his defense, because he greatly raises defense as well. So all of that was pretty good. Honestly speaking, really, really impressive, and super duper happy with just everything basically. Honestly, always super duper happy to have like this level of performance from this unit. And yeah, so very strong rotation there. I think for the most part, a good unit that's reliable without being too. It's quite an old unit, so hopefully players should have enough copies of him. Now beyond that, I think in terms of units, the Kid Buu is obviously our lead. Kid Buu being a very suitable lead because he leads Battle of Fate, but also Majin Buu Saga, whilst also fulfilling the requirement for us to have some of the Majin Power units. So that did help us out as well, without it being too crazy. And yeah, I think a relatively good unit for me. Honestly speaking, I was quite happy with his overall performance, and I think in general I was pretty happy with like Kid Buu as a unit. He's obviously got his nullification. I think his defense was pretty solid without being, you know, too good. My one's not got a lot of dupes, so that's obviously something that's, you know, quite important. But I would say overall he was a pretty good unit. I think at the end of the day, a very strong unit that performed quite well. So yeah, I think overall, honestly speaking, just a super duper strong, super duper like good team, reliable, super like just great. Honestly, I was very impressed with the team. I think they did a good job, and at the end of the day, I was very happy with the overall performance. I think for me, if I could change anything, obviously the Int Ultimate Gohan that we brought, not necessarily the craziest unit, at least from my perspective, not the craziest unit. Decent, but just not anything spectacular. I think at the end of the day, I was, you know, you could bring any other unit and you probably have a pretty good, you know, like performance without it being, you know, that Gohan. I don't think he was imperative to absolutely anything when it comes to the team build. The fights itself aren't too difficult. Everything up to the Vegetos where things get a little bit interesting. He can evade attacks, it's nothing too crazy. He also starts to hit relatively hard, so here you may want to consider, you know, certain things, like for example, whether you are going to, you know, take, you know, whether you are going to use items. So I use a Whis here, and that makes everything more than fine, and so I use a Whis. Everything ran really well. The team did okay. Obviously Mr. Gohan, you could see they're taking a fair chunk of damage. You want to try and breeze through the physical phase, because Mr. Gohan basically will just die. Like, how can I say, he will just die if he gets hit by like a super or too many attacks in the physical phase. That's just far too much damage. And the Vegeta also massively lowers defense on his super as well. So when he hits you with the super, he will actually lower your defense like quite tremendously, like a ridiculous amount. So you need to be aware of that when you're talking about your performance. And then finally, obviously, you come to the Goku phase, and Goku's Spirit Bomb can hit pretty hard, but it also stuns you, which isn't great. The fact that it stuns you can cause you quite a few issues, and yeah, that basically covers it, I think, in terms of everything you need to know. So honestly speaking, it wasn't that bad. I think the team we chose did a pretty good job. I was quite happy with the team we chose, just in general. Like, I think it ran well without being too hindering or too difficult to run. I think everything about it was solid without being unspectacular. I think, you know, obviously you would like to make a couple changes. I think most players would like to make a couple changes if they could. I think at the end of the day, everything ran quite smoothly, or at least as smooth as we wanted it to run. Like, at least from my perspective, I think it ran as smooth as we wanted it to run. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the 18 turn mission. You will see we did it in about 20 turns, which is a little bit slow. Unfortunately, we got stunned or sealed at the wrong times. But that's okay. Like I say, you'll get there eventually. So don't panic too much. I think everything ran, more than fine. And I think the team overall was pretty good, pretty solid. So yeah, that basically covers everything from my side, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then, bye.